Hi, this is Damien Marie AtHope, and I am an axiological atheist. And today I'm going to give you a little presentation on early atheistic doubting, which to me starts around 2,570 years ago. And there's some confirmation that this atheistic doubting and the atheistic thinking is mainly seen in Greek philosophers. So men create gods in their own image. Atheism, in a sense, is nothing new. It goes as far back as I stated at 5,070 years ago, where there is a confirmation of this doubting in Greek philosophers. However, doubting gods is likely as old as the inventions of gods, which should erode the thinking that belief in gods is a belief in some sort of a default. So, Xenophanes' surviving writings display a skepticism that began to be more commonly expressed about 1,700 years to 1,600 years ago. He once said, "Humans think that their gods are born and have the human's own clothes, voice, and form, and were created in the central claim of the anthropomorphic concept of gods." Summarized as, if cattle, horses, and lions had hands and could paint with their hands and create works such as men do, they would, like humans, depict their god shapes like their own bodies, such as a sort, then form as themselves, that have such as horses would make their god like horses, cattle would make their gods like cattle, lions would make their gods like lions also. We see that this is how, in a sense, the central concept also in Eastern Africans, and it is their gods, in a sense, go back to things like having snub nose and they're black, and this is considered to be Ethiopians, and this is referring to what the philosopher was referring to. And to him, Thracians of southern Europe say that their gods are pale and red hair. If you are a religious believer, may I remind you that faith in the acquisition of knowledge is not a valid method worth believing in. Because what proof is faith of anything a religion claims by faith? As there are many people who have different faiths even in the same religion. So, expressions of atheistic thinking, I'm going to give you the rundown. So, like I said, I believe it probably goes all the way back to the beginning of someone saying that there is something someone else doubted that what that was claim was. Anyways, so around 2,600 years ago is an ancient Indian philosopher who was known as a proponent for the early Indian materialism. And around 2,535 years ago to 2,475 years ago was Heraclitus. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I'm not good at pronouncing names. Anyways, was a Greek pre-Socratic philosopher, a native of Greek city of Ephesus, Ionia on the coast of Anatolia, Turkey, known as Asia Minor. Around 2,510 years ago to 2,428 years ago, it's Anaxagoras. I can't even pronounce it. Anyways, Greek pre-Socratic philosopher, and also a native at the time. The place was Asia Minor or Turkey, when it was under control of the Persian Empire. And then around 2,500 to 2,400 years ago, we have African pygmies tribes that seem to identify with no gods or spirits, or now have no ceremonies and stuff that resemble religion, or at least advanced religion. Around 2,490 years ago to 2,430 years ago is another Greek pre-Socratic philosopher, Empedocles. I guess I'm not very good at pronouncing these names. Philosopher, and he was from a Greek city in Sicily. And then around 2,460 to 2,370 years ago, we have Democritus, a Greek pre-Socratic philosopher considered to be the father of modern science. Probably had some disbelief amounting to what we could think of as atheism. And around 2,399 years ago, we have Socrates, a Greek philosopher who was tried for sinfulness by teaching doubt-state gods. Around 2,341 to 2,270 years ago, we have Epicurus, a Greek philosopher known for comprising atheistic critics, and he famously stated that, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not impotent. Is God able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is God both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? If he is neither able nor willing, then why call him God? This last expression seems to be an expression of what I think is axiological atheism, or have a connection to my axiological atheism ideas. To understand axiology, in a sense, is to understand and utilize value, or to actually express a value consciousness or a value conscientiousness, to both give a strong moral or ethical axiological arguments, problem of evil, as well as use it to fortify humanism and positive ethical persuasions of helping and human care and responsibilities. Because of value blindness often gives rise to things like sociopathic and psychopathic evils. So let's get to the Indian philosopher. Okay, who is considered an ancient philosopher, who was the first known proponent to Indian materialism. Okay, he was an ancient Indian philosopher. In the 6th century BC, he was considered to be the first known proponent of Indian materialism and the forerunner to the Shakra school. Chavarak, I can't pronounce it. Chavarak school? I don't know. He was probably a contemporary of the Buddha and or the other Indian philosophers at that time. It was, or it has been frequently noted that the doctrines of the Lokoyukta, or whatever it is, school were considerably drawn from his teachings. Living about the time of the founders of Buddhism and Jainism, this philosopher was one of the earliest people in recorded history to deny the existence of God, spirits, souls, a non-material realm, the afterlife, reincarnation, absolute moral values, and karma. He was a major influence on the Indian school of philosophy known as Karveka. Though he denied the existence of absolute morals, he does not seem to have abused people or even thought his own pleasure, for he was an ascetic. He chose to, in a sense, ward off worldly pleasures like alcohol or sex. There is no evidence to support that this was, in a sense, hedonist, because he had, in a sense, a very simple life. He wore a garment made of hair and lived an ascetic lifestyle. He did not wear precious ornaments. He did not surround himself with beautiful women, or men, as far as I know. He did not live in gluttony. Hedonism, in a sense, was a straw man that it's been tried to use against that and the school that he influenced. Since, sadly, though, nothing of his teachings in script have survived, except some scattered references made by his opponents for sake of refutation. Thus, due to the nature of these references, the base of his work in philosophy has to be derived by filtered, obscure sense associated with him. So, anyways, there's another person who calls this person a proto-materialist. It says that he preached as in a sense, a ongoing kind of or beginning materialist doctrine. In a sense, also involved good deeds and charity, gained, in a sense, a man nothing in the end. His body dissolved into his primary elements at death, no matter what he had or what he had done. Nothing remained. Good and evil, charity and compassion were all irrelevant to this man's fate. Or man's fate. Or human's fate, I should say. Around 2,535 years ago to 2,475, Heraclitus, Greek pre-Socratic philosopher, was, as I said, part of Turkey when it was still, or it was connected to the Persian Empire. And he was distinguished, even though little is known about his early life, his education. He regarded himself, in a sense, as self-taught and a pioneer of wisdom. From the lonely life he led, or is believed to have led, and still more from the apparently paradoxical nature of his philosophy, and his stress upon headless unconsciousness of mankind, which he called obscure, and the weeping philosopher. He was famous, for instance, on ever-present change as being a fundamental essence of the universe, as stated in famous saying, "No man ever steps into the same river twice." This is commonly considered to be one of the first, in a sense, degradations into the philosophical concepts of becoming, and has been considered that what is as one of the first things into this concept of being. As such, other philosophers commonly considered to be associated with this is associated with the founders of ontology. Scholars have generally believed that either one of the other philosophers, in a sense, were inspired by him. So think of it this way too, that he sees it as the path, up and down are one and the same, though these doctrines, in a sense, are contrary, sort of. He's just stating that everything, in a sense, is moving. No entity may ever occupy a single space at the same time. This, along with his utterance that all entities come to be in accordance with this logos, literally word, reason, account, has been a subject of numerous interpretations. According to around 2,510 to 2,428 years ago, we have Epicurus, Greek pre-philosopher, a native, and I spell these names wrong, so anyways, a native of Asia Minor, and Epicurus came to Athens. According to other philosophers, he later in life changed, in a sense, with impiety and went into exile. And Anaxagoras did cosmology, explaining meteorites and eclipses. And it was said of him that he predicted the fall of meteorite in 2,467 years ago. By ancient standards of proof, his cosmological view, but modern standards is impossible. He argued that the sun was a mass of heated metal, like that worked by a blacksmith. These are some of his ideas. He said that the moon reflected the light of the sun, which is correct. That the moon has mountains, which is also correct. And that they were inhabited, which is incorrect as far as we know. The sun and the stars are masses of stone kicked off from the earth, which is incorrect, ablaze and in rapid rotation in a line with the Pythagorean account of the cosmos for the stars, but not for the sun. And like Socrates, he was charged with impiety for irrelevance to the gods for these explanations, such as the sun and the moon, having before been things of gods. In Plato's Apologies, Plato account of Socrates' trial, which will suddenly state that Socrates asked by them to whether or not they think the sun is a stone and a moon, earth, and Socrates responded by wondering if they were confusing him with Anaxagoras. Socrates states that neither jury nor his young students are stupid enough to believe that he would hold such absurd views. Clearly, the assembly was referring to Exagger's impiety and minds that he procured Socrates for the same crime. And Socrates is aware of this and distances himself from it. Socrates was not considered with, in a sense, connected to cosmology, arguing instead about ethics and our ability to acquire knowledge and wisdom. And Anaxagoras was put on trial in Athens. According to some sources, someone spoke in his defense, but he was still sentenced to death. After which it is believed that he was helped to flee, in a sense. According to others, he was actually sent to Lampicus before he could be put on trial. So, who knows? Either way, he left Athens. So, let's go on. All right. Around 2,500 years ago to 2,400 years ago, according to the Story of Civilization book series, certain African pygmy tribes had no identifiable gods, spirits, or religious beliefs or rituals. And even what burials occur, in a sense, were said to have done without real ceremonies. Most societies, though, throughout history have indeed had supernatural religions, one sort or another. But this doesn't mean that they all did and always in the same way. According to William James Dunnett, an American writer, historian, philosopher, known for his work in which is The Story of Civilization, explains that there seems to have been atheistic, rationalist, or skeptic thinking in Africa. As he explains, certain pygmy tribes found in Africa were observed to have no identifiable cults or rites. There were no totems, no gods, no spirits. Their dead were buried without special ceremonies or accompanying items and received no further attention. They even appeared to lack superstitious, according to travelers' reports. Which I doubt that they lacked all superstitions, but tribes in Cameroon only believed in, a sense, malicious gods, and so made no effort to placate or please them. According to them, it was utterly useless even to bother trying, and more important, to deal with whatever problems were placed in their path. Another group only admitted the possibility that gods might exist, but went no further to explain or deny. Neither prayers nor sacrifices were suggested in any way either. When specifically asked a god, the reports that they answered very little in a very puzzled manner. Is he on a rock? On a white anthill? On a tree? Never saw a god, is their response. Durant also reports that the Zulu, when asked who made and governs things like the setting sun and the growing of trees, they answered, "No, we see them, but we cannot tell how they came. we suppose that they came all by themselves. Sounds pretty atheistic to me. Around 2,490 years ago to 2,430 years ago, we have Epicurus. I suck at all these Greek names. Anyways, is a Greek pre-Socratic philosopher. Oh, actually, he's a Greek philosopher and a citizen of a Greek city in Sicily. Influenced by Pythagorean and whatever. He was a vegetarian who supported the doctrine of reincarnation. He is generally considered to be the last Greek philosopher who have recorded his ideas in verse. Some of his works survive more than in the case for other pre-Socratic philosophers. His father seems to have been instrumental in the overthrowing of a tyrant, presumably in 2470. He was seeming to be fond of this and continued this tradition by helping to overthrow succeeding oligarchic government. He is said to have been, in a sense, having support for the poor. He was magnanimous, in a sense, the overbearing conduct of the oligarchs, and even declined the sovereignty of the city when it was offered to him. He was considered to be, in a sense, as I said, a philosopher writing in verse, and his two things are especially one called On Nature. And he was undoubtedly, in a sense, inspired by other Greek philosophers. Aristotle called him the father of rhetoric, and although he acknowledged only the matter as a point of comparison between poems and the epics of Homer, he described him as Homeric and powerful in his dictation. Also spoke of him with enthusiasm by others, philosophers, and view him as a model. Some scholars now believe that there was, in a sense, only one poem he wrote, not two, and that the one was merely a former or beginning of his one called On Nature. There was, in a sense, the poem was originally considered to have 2,000 lines, but then when it's found, it only has 250, including 70 lines. But anyways, it was this poem which since outlined his philosophical system. In it, he explains not only the nature and history of the universe, or what he believed, including his theory of the four classical elements, but he describes theories of causation, perception, and thought, as well as explaining phenomenon and biological processes. He didn't, in a sense, belong to any specific school, and he was an eclectic in his thinking. He combined much, in a sense, by other philosophers and other schools. He was a firm believer in Olympic mysteries, as well as a scientific thinker and a pursuer of physics. Aristotle mentions him among Ionic philosophers, and he places him in the very close relation to, in a sense, other important philosophers. He put forward the idea that we see objects because light streams out of our eyes and touches them. While flawed, this became the fundamental basis for later Greek philosophers and mathematicians like Euclid, who constructed some of the most important theories of light, vision, and optics. Knowledge is explained by the principle that elements in the thing outside us are perceived by the corresponding elements in ourselves. Around 2,460 to 2,370 years ago, Democritus, Greek pre-philosopher, considered to be the father of modern science, probably amounting to some disbelief or atheism. His exact contributions difficult to disentangle from those of others, as they are often mentioned together, other philosophers. Their speculations on atoms, in a sense, also atomic structures, regarded as more of a scientist than other Greek philosophers. However, the ideas raised on very different bases. Largely ignored in ancient Athens, is said to have been disliked so much by Plato that later wished all of his books burned. He was nevertheless well known to his fellow northern-born philosopher Aristotle. Many consider him to be the father of modern science. It is known that he wrote on Babylon and visited Egypt. In a sense, he says he lived there for years. It says 5 years. He himself declared that amongst his contemporaries none had made greater journeys, seen more countries, and met more scholars than himself. He particularly mentions the Egyptian mathematicians, whose knowledge, in a sense, he connects to. And during his travels, he became acquainted with the considered magi. One of the magi who is said to have aided in teaching him. Around 2,399 years ago, Socrates, a famous Greek philosopher, was tried for sinfulness by teaching doubt of state gods. Socrates was a classical Greek Athenian philosopher, credited as one of the founders of Western philosophy, and as being the first moral philosopher, supposedly, of the Western ethical tradition of thought, for sure. An enigmatic figure, he made no writings himself known, and is known chiefly through the accounts of classical writers writing after his lifetime, particularly students Plato and Xenophon. Other sources include other philosophers, playwrights. It is the sources that have written, during his lifetime. Though portrayal in Plato's dialogue, Socrates has become renowned for his contribution to the fields of ethics and epistemology. It is this Platonic Socrates who lends his name to the concept of the Socratic method. Socrates exerted a strong influence on philosophers in later antiquity and the modern era. Around 2,341 to 2,270 years ago, Epicurus, Greek philosopher, known for composing atheistic critiques, and famously stated, "Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then is not impotent. If is God able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God?" Influenced by Democritus, Aristotle, and possibly Cynics, he turned against Platonism of his day and established his own school, known as the Garden in Athens. He and his followers were known for eating simple meals and discussing a wide range of philosophical subjects, and he openly allowed women to join the school as a matter of policy. For Epicurus, the purpose of philosophy was to attain the happy, tranquil life, characterized by peace and freedom from fear, and the absence of pain, and living by self-sufficient life surrounded by friends. That sounds pretty decent to me. He taught that the root of all human neurosis is death denial, that's not true, and that tendencies of human beings to assume that death will be horrific and painful, which he claimed causes unnecessary anxiety, selfish, self-protective behaviors, and hypocrisy. According to Epicurus, death is the end of both the body and the soul, and therefore should not be feared. Likewise, Epicurus taught that the gods, though they don't exist, have no... Like Epicurus thought the gods, though they do exist, or could exist, I guess, have no involvement in human affairs and do not punish or reward people for their actions. Nonetheless, he maintained that people should still behave ethically because amoral behavior will burden them with guilt and prevent them from attaining a good, happy life. Like Aristotle, Epicurus was an empiricist, meaning that he believed in the senses, an only reliable source of knowledge about the world. Well, then that should tell us something, and I agree with it in the fact that religion's continuing in our modern world, full of science facts, should be seen as little more than a set of irrational conspiracy theories of reality. Nothing more than a confused reality made up of pseudo-reality, unscientific echoes from man's ancient past. Rational thinkers must ask themselves, why continue to believe in religion's unjustified stories? Religion myths which are nothing more than like childlike stories, an obstacle of obsolete tales, once used to explain how the world works. Acting like magic was needed when it was always only nature. These childlike religious stories should not even be taken seriously, but sadly too often they are. Without realizing it, we accumulate beliefs that we allow to negatively influence our lives. In order to bring about a new awareness, we need to be willing to alter skewed beliefs. Rational thinkers must examine the facts instead of blindly following beliefs or faith. I will offer a little bit of my collected research information, such as on the archaeology, history, linguistics, genetics, science, art, sociology, geography, psychology, philosophy, theology, biology, and zoology, just to name a few. And that's what helped me to come up with some of the ideas that I'm about to express. These things should make you question your beliefs if you have faith. Because is this a fact or is it just your feelings? What we need is real information and ideas important to ponder and expand on. Excuse me. The two main goals are to expose the evolution of religion by stating that around 100,000 years ago or so is the invention of, to me, humans' religion, and to offer the challenges to remove the rationale that faith offers. It is like the belief in myths that have plagued mankind for too long are still being allowed to work. We often think that we know what truth is. Nevertheless, this can be but a vantage point away from losing credibility if we are not willing to follow valid and reliable reason and evidence to validate our conclusions. We must remember that it is an ever process of an enveloping of knowledge. The door of reason opens not once, but many times. Come on a journey to free thought, where the war is against ignorance and the victor is a rational mind. So my ideas on understanding the evolution of religion is pre-animism starts about 300,000 years ago. Animism is about 100,000 years old from Africa. Totemism, I surmise, is about 50,000 years old from Europe. And shamanism, to me, is an emergence of 30,000 years ago or so in Siberia. Paganism is about 12,000 years ago or so in Turkey. Progressed organized religion is something that we see 5,000 years ago and after, such as that in Egypt. And the current world religions are all younger than 4,000 years ago. Again, if you are a religious believer, may I remind you that faith in the acquisition of knowledge is not a valid method worth believing in, because what proof is faith of anything religion claims by faith? As many people can have a different faith even in the same religion. This brings me to the idea of what is a God. If you think you believe in a God, what do you mean by the term God? Saying a name tells me not one thing about the thing itself. I am asking to know its beingness, its thingness, its attributes, its qualities, the ontology. Thus, what is the thing, God, to which you are talking about? And I want you to explain its beingness, thingness, attributes, qualities fully. Religion and religious theistic people with supernatural beliefs often seem as though they haven't thought much about it. And that seems is something that we can help using this ontology type of questions about things like the beingness, thingness, attributes, qualities that they are trying to refer to. What do you mean by God when you use the term God? And I am not asking you for the name you attach to the thing you label as a God. I don't need to know what the God you believe in is known by. Rather, it is an asking of what is this thing you are naming as a God, and what that thing is, its qualities in every detail explainable, like all things we have, if they are actually real. Are you just making stuff up? Are you guessing? Are you hoping? Or are you just simply promoting someone else's unjustified ideas? You want to believe. Again, what is a God? Do you want to know what is true? Or want what you believe without concern for what may actually be true? I am not the abused thing that religion made. I am a shooting star, blazing bright, shining far past my past. Religion and its God myths are like a spiritually transmitted disease of the mind. This infection, even once cured, holds mental disruptions which can linger on for a lifetime. This brings me to the thought of the interconnectedness of religious thinkings. To me, I've heard religion explained in a lot of ways. Let me explain it in mine. Religion is an evolved product. It is a human cultural idea. In a general way, it all starts with animism, a theoretical belief in supernatural powers or spirits. And this is a physically expressed, in a sense, with totemism, a theoretical belief in a mystical relationship with powers, spirits through a totem item, which then enlists a full-time specific person to perform this worship and believed interaction, such as a shamanism, a theoretical belief in the access and influence over spirits or gods through rituals. In addition, there is the further employment of myths and gods, more formalized, added to all the above, which is paganism, and is often a lot more nature-based at its earliest forms than current top world religions, although they too, to me, are just a form of paganism, just a more progressed, organized version of it, thus hinting to their close link to more ancient religions, thinking from which they stem. My hypothesis is expressed with an explanation of the building of a theoretical house. Think of that as the modern religious development. It seems ancient people had to survive amazing threats in a dangerous universe by superstition perceived as good and evil, and human immorality and imperfection of the soul, which was thought to affect the still living and led to what I think of as ancestor worship. Presumably, this ancestor worship led to the belief in supernatural beings at some point. Certainly, probably souls already were there, if nothing more than just the memory of an ancestor, but eventually it turned into an actual person. With some of these turned into, in a sense, belief later into gods. These, I think that it was like an actual person, then in a sense becomes, held as esteem, and then the esteem later, becomes worship, and then that later becomes, some kind of mythical thing, and then becomes a god. It's something like that. Anyways, these feeble myths called gods were just a human-conceived idea that was made from nothing into something over and over, changing again and again, taking on more as they evolved. And all the while, they were thought to be, of course, special. However, it is just supernatural, animistic spirit belief perceived as sacred at its core. Historically, around 5,000 years ago, in large city-state societies such as Egypt or Iraq, accumulated to make religion into something kind of new. A social, cultural, governmental, religious monarchy, where all, or at least many or most of the people were in such large city-state societies, were all familiar and committed to, in a sense, the existence of a unified or somewhat unified religion. In a sense, it gave an integrated life identity package of control dynamics with a fixed, closed, magical doctrine. However, this juggernaut of integrated religion identity package of dogmatic propaganda certainly did not exist, or if developed to an extent, it was highly limited in the most of the older prehistoric, smaller societies, although it may have had to some extent, as they seem to lack most of the strong control dynamics with a fixed, in a sense, closed magical doctrine. These magical beliefs could be, at times, added or removed, especially in earlier times. They seem to have not as much issue with development. And many people just wanted them to see develop religious dynamics everywhere, even if it's not always there. I think that some things, instead, we have to largely, understand we have fragmentations of religion ideas until the real domestication of religion. So, religions as we think of them today, are kind of a new fad, even if they go back to possibly 6,000 years in time of human existence. This amount is almost nothing when seen in the long, slow evolution of religion that started for humans at least 70,000 years ago, with one of the oldest evidence of human worship, a stone snake in South Africa that's 75 to 70,000 years old. And this message of how religion and, in a sense, later gods are intertwined with humans is clearly just a man-made set of ideas that was developed slowly and was invented, reinvented, and implemented piece by piece, in a sense, until we end up with what we have today. This seems to be a simple point, which some are just not grasping how devastating this is to any claims of truth religions make today, when we can see the lie clearly in the archaeological sites showing otherwise. Religions are an evolved product. What we don't understand in life, we come to fear. That which we fear, we often learn to hate. Things that we hate, we usually seek to destroy. It is upon us to try and understand the unknown or the unfamiliar, not letting fear drive us into the unreasonable arms of hate or harm, so commonly attached to religion. Religious beliefs often don't stay in the belief category, as if it is something chosen temporary, if needed, and changeable if required. No. What is most common is that religious beliefs are completely infused to a person's chosen identity. Thus, it is not what they believe so much as it is more a factor of who they think they are. What this means is if they are later challenged and given reason to let the belief go, this is largely disrupted because they and the belief they mixed with their personal identity is making itself a loss. In other words, you'll lose that identity. Not just a possible belief loss, but a perceived personal identity loss. That's one thing I really try to do, is be aware of that identity loss feeling. So when people get so threatened or angry at me when I attack their beliefs, I try not to overreact back, because I try to understand who I'm talking to believes they're being personally, in a sense, threatened, even though they're not. It's just a challenging of ideas, and it makes them uncomfortable. They have cognitive dissonance, and they respond by pushing that idea away so they don't have to deal with it, or denial. If you are a religious believer, may I remind you, faith and the acquisition of knowledge is not a valid method worth believing in, because what proof is faith of anything religion claims by faith, as many people can have a different faith even in the same religion? So a little bit about me. As I said before, I'm an axiological atheist, or a value theory, or a value philosopher atheist, or it could be a value science atheist. And it's a social science, in a sense. I am an out atheist, anti-theist, and anti-religionist as a value-wise ethical duty. How can we be silent? Watch as yet another generation is indoctrinated with religious faith, fear, and foolishness. Religion and its God myths are a spiritually transmitted disease of the mind. This infection, even once cured, can hold mental disruptions that can linger on for a lifetime. When you start thinking that your out atheism, anti-theism, or anti-religionism is not vitally needed, just remember all the millions of children being indoctrinated right now who need our help badly. Ones who desperately need our help with the truth. 3 things are common in all religions to me: pseudoscience, pseudo-history, and pseudo-morality. And the biggest of all these things is the widespread forced indoctrination of children, violating their free choice of what to believe or not believe. I personally experienced and hate forced hereditary religion. I was a Christian until I was 35 and I went to college. Atheist as an acronym is against theological heresy, endangering intelligent, sensible thinking. By me referring to theological heresy, I am saying theology is heresy to reality. No gods. Why? No evidence, no intelligence, and no goodness, which equals valid atheist conclusion. I am a caring, firebrand, axiological atheist. I wish to be hard on ideas, but I wish to be kind to people. I heard it said, we can't trust science. I often hear fideists or faithists, religionists, and theists, just like many conspiracy theorists who champion this strategic implementation of supposed skepticism over real doubting confirmed science, so they can add their non-skeptical employment confusion, the unreal conspiracy theory that includes gods and their religion, as true. Such a skepticism, which is used for saying science can't fully be trusted as being not wrong or being right or trusted at all, especially if it relates to their religious persuasion ideas. Science has made mistakes, they say. Yes. But it was science itself with a scientific method standard that found out that mistake and corrected or attempts to correct errors as well. Tell me a religion that really does that. Okay, even if I agree, science is not perfect, but this is often corrected internally. It's not like you have to have philosophers attack science to figure everything out in science. Science realizes it and tries to falsify its own claims. As science itself is self-correcting. Show me a religion or a conspiracy theorist who will do that, including the critical challenge and, if needed, removal or replacement of any belief upon new or better evidence. And yet, without claimed infallibility, science as a method to accurately learn, understand, and explain has helped us greatly. Thus know the universe as we can. Science, hands down, what science in a sense is a group of ideas and tests and facts about the world, hands down is the best and most objective standard of how to know the world around us or navigate what is understood actually something in reality possible or has a containment in what is real. If one rejects science, how serious can we take them? And from what or how can they claim to understand our world without using science? Without science, what objective standard could you hope to put in its place? I am a rationalist, but I would have to say I'm very skeptical, to say the least, of anyone that could claim that. Critical thinking. What does it mean to be open to learn? not just what can I use thinking to challenge. A general thinking in all my theorizing is a kind of justificationism. I make it kind of simple, though, that I just think that we should have things justified, and that we should use methodological standards to try to understand the world. I've been asked, Damien, I'm an atheist, but I have faith in gravity, but it isn't exactly a faith. Well, you're confused if you think this to me. Because no, I don't agree with this. You don't, in a sense, have faith in gravity or gravitation. As in, it is a fundamental force you can have proof of, or if lacking some direct proof of, could use inference of direct proof relations. And if even less evidence, you use, in a sense, conjecture, not faith. Conjecture being like an educated guess, meaning that you're taking some knowledge stemming from other knowledge of what's known to then know. You're not faith. In a sense, thinking that you need faith in gravity because you wonder or worry what is going on when you're walking down a set of stairs or you're going to fall back up, I don't think so. You immediately know that going down, your body feels like it's going down. It doesn't go backwards back up the steps. Or trying to go up, it doesn't make you go down like an escalator. Or there's not any, it's not like we're floating and could just drift up the stairs. So you don't need faith, strong belief without evidence, if there is massive proof, almost to the point that it is easily self-evident, or somewhat self-evident. You don't, unless you deny the ability of the mind itself to understand any part of the world. You don't need faith, strong belief without evidence, actually, for anything. If it is warranted, it will or should have some amount of corroborating evidence. Or it doesn't deserve, in a sense, this sort of strong belief. But any amount of belief at all is surrounded to need someone to or something to ground it into their worthness in relation to reality. The only place evidence, in a sense, in that kind of context comes from. Gravity or gravitation is a natural phenomenon by which all things with mass are brought towards or gravitate towards one or another, including planets, stars, and galaxies. Gravity is responsible for various phenomena observed on the Earth and throughout the universe. For example, it causes the Earth and other planets to orbit around the Sun, the Moon to orbit around the Earth, and the formation of tides, the formation of evolution of solar system, stars, galaxies. Since energy and mass are equivalent, all forms of energy, including light, also cause gravitation and are under the influence of it. On Earth, gravity gives weight to physical object and causes ocean tides. The gravitation attraction of the original gaseous matter present in the universe caused it to begin coalescing, forming stars, and the stars into grouped together into galaxies. So gravity is responsible for many of the large-scale structures we perceive in the universe. All right, well, I'll go ahead and let you go. So, bye.